everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Hobby Cheating. So today we are going to talk about lava bases and making lava bases. Now, I'm going to show you one technique for doing it here live, but one of the great things about lava bases is they're actually really easy. They're super easy, and I highly encourage you to try variations on a theme of what I'm going to show you today, because there is a lot of ways to do this. But I'll give you the way that I like, and we can go from there. So we're going to be making a base for this little guy, for Karnak, our little three-headed dog. And like all of my corn-based stuff, he's going to be on lava. And we've got our base all prepped up here. So let's get to what I did up to this point. So this is just standard sort of base. Piece of cork that's going to be our rock that Karnak is going to stand on. And then around the edge here, you can see the texturing. Okay. And all that is some of our Vallejo dark earth, this mud spread around, and I built some ridges and stuff like that, so we have plenty of stuff for to catch on, because we're going to be using some dry brushing here. Okay, that's it. I let this dry, then I primed the whole thing like German gray, and then shot a little bit of gray kind of around in an irregular pattern just to kind of create some variation in the tone. So we're going to do almost basically all of this with a dry brush, just a nice crappy dry brush, whatever you've got sitting around. Now, I already have a little bit of a light gray here on my palette, and this is the first place where there could be a lot of deviation. So how you choose to do your rocks. I like my rocks to still be sort of black and gray and white rocks, but that isn't really technically correct. If I was going to be really technically correct, these should be the rocks should be almost completely black, because they're obsidian. They're actually formed from the volcanic stone. I just like the contrast a little better, so I do this. You can do whatever you like. Also, because I started this a long time ago and made the first group of like 20 figs I did like this, and I sort of committed myself without really thinking about it. So now I better like it, because that's what we're doing now. And so as you can see, I'm just literally dry brushing on some gray here. We're doing a fairly thick dry brush for this one, because we want the rock to stand out. So there's that. Just that easy. Boy, that was... I'm sure that you really needed a tutorial on dry brushing. Nothing too complicated. So far, very easy. So the next thing I want to do then is we're going to take some white, and I'm just going to do a very light dry brush around that. So I'm just using a little like base true white here. I don't use regular white with dry brushing much, because it gets chalky, but in this case that's going to be an advantage. So we're going to use that in our favor, because we want our rock to look chalky and, you know, dry, because it's a rock. So we're just going to kind of very lightly dry brush this one over. We're not looking to really make any big changes. Just pick out some edges a little stronger, create a little color contrast. The interesting thing about white is that, you know, especially when you're putting it over here, it's really not going to stand out that much over a light gray. So you can, you know, you're not really going to screw up. I make sure to get the edges a little bit, because that's going to be handy later. All right, so kind of just drag it along the edge there, where this is going to probably be lava coming up around the side, right? So around this area here, we want to make sure we get that. Okay, so, and there we go. Our rock is basically prepared. It's just that easy. Now, you know, if we want to take this a little farther, do a little more with this rock, we can say get out some various color shades, colors. So I do like Citadel shades, so we could have like put on a little Karienburg Crimson to create some color on there, use a little Nuln Oil to darken it back up. So just so you can see how that looks. What I like to do with this kind of stuff whenever I'm going to do like a shade on like a rock or a natural element, I don't do it evenly. I just literally grab some and throw it down on the rock. Maybe I'm kind of where the shadow of where he'll be, maybe not. It doesn't really matter. You're just trying to create natural tonal variations. You're not trying to actually coat the whole thing. We're not using this in true sort of shade fashion. Literally, that's it. I'll just drag a little bit of that around just to create some more subtle tonal variations, right? So now I've got some different grays and different whites mixed in together there. Okay, so rock is done. Now let's get to the lava. So here out I have my color set I'm going to use for this lava. I have a very dark red, a next tone red up, a flat red which is very bright. I have a thin orange that's on purpose, and I have a yellow that's actually from Model Color, which is, you know, even though Model Color is a fairly thick paint, this is still about as thin as it gets. And I have just a thinned white. Okay, so all of these are going to be used to create our lava. So let's start at the beginning. We're going to start with our whole red. This is just a brown red. There's an equivalent to this in most any line. I love this color. It's a very good dark brown red, and it works as an excellent base for our purposes here. So we're going to shake that up nice and good. We're going to get some of that onto our palette. I'm not being careful with any of this because it doesn't matter. We're going to go ahead and clear out the little thing because my tip is apparently clogged. There we go. I don't actually use this one very much. I haven't made a lava base in a little while. Okay, so there we go. We got some of that on our palette. We're going to grab just our crappy dry brush because, again, we're going to be dragging it over rough stuff here. We don't want to use a nice brush. We don't want to mess that up. And plus, we can be messy with this lava. Lava is a liquid. You know what liquids do? They flow. So what am I going to do? We're just going to take this and we're going to go ahead and just paint. We're just going to spread it around. That's the idea here. So we're going to just paint it up in here. You'll notice that I'm getting some up on the rock. Right? Let's turn that so you can see that. It's intentional. And we're just trying to literally get a nice clean coat down here, completely covering the bottom. Now, for those of you who might ask, no, I'm not using my little thing here because I don't care. It's a base. I'm just touching it. But if it makes you feel better, it is right there. So here we go. I can do this for everybody. There we go. Now I don't have to touch it at all. Okay. So we're just going to get some red on there. Right? Okay. There we are. Nice and simple. Now, with this first coat, you pretty much want to let this dry mostly. Okay, so I'm going to talk for a minute while I'm just letting this dry. It doesn't take long. It's, you know, a few seconds, but I'll talk about kind of the theory here with lava. So you need to think about how your lava is sourced to talk about how you move through these vents. In general, when I'm doing this, I am assuming the cooler lava is closer to the rock. Okay? In other words, I'm assuming that this rock is not a source of the lava. If it is, if you have a lava source, then that is the hottest thing. So if you think about like a lava vent, right? That's belching out hot yellow lava, right? And then it's slowly getting cooler until it eventually turns black, right? So how you're intending to portray your lava is fairly important here. In this case, I'm assuming that where the person is standing is actually the coolest area of the mini, okay, or of the base. And that the warmest areas are out here on the edge where assumingly the source of the lava is. All right, so we're sort of jumping, or the characters are sort of, I don't know, I guess all my corn people are kind of playing sort of like a really suicidal hopscotch through a lava field. That's how I picture it. And so hence what we're going to do here is we're going to radiate out from this deepest red here, just in the recesses by the time we're done, out to bright yellows and oranges here, okay, where it would be the hottest. All right, so if you think about your fire, right, if you think about like when you paint fire, it's the same technique you're using, right? Fire starts out white or yellow down by the hottest part near like the wick or the fuel source, and it eventually turns red. Okay, so we're going to just employ that same tactic here. Now, I'm going to build this up from this darker red, right, into this yellow. But there's other ways you could do this. And this, by the way, you can also cheat with an airbrush with this too. I'm going to do this with a brush, but you can do this with an airbrush too. I could also just, with an airbrush, I could have blown out this red real quick and then just started mixing my way up the colors and kind of done some spray around here to kind of mix in my thing. I wouldn't get as much ridges, and I might still have to come in here and do a little dry brushing to kind of mix it up, because in the end, we want the lava to look mixed up and flowing around and like it's not just sort of a solid color stream. That's going to be one of our keys, okay, is that this needs to look like it's a swirling liquid thing full of all sorts of different temperatures and varying heat and things like that. Okay? All right, so enough talking. We're more or less as dry as we need to be there. So let's go to our next color, which is going to be our Gory Red. This is Game Color Gory Red. There are many other reds like this. It's sort of a mid-tone darker red. You might call it might often be called like a bloody red or something like that in the various color ranges. So whatever you've got that's about that color, you can see that on the palette there. Again, you don't need much for this unless you're doing like a huge number of bases. There's how that looks on the back of my thumb, quite bright. It will not be that bright when I put it on here. And we're going to be a little aggressive with this first red because we really do want to get this fairly bright. So we're not trying to base coat here. We're not going to paint it completely. Okay, we're not trying to completely cover our previous red, but we're covering a lot of it. So we don't have to hold back here. We can kind of go a little crazy, and we can just kind of spread that around, and that's fine. We're still kind of dry brushing here, but it's kind of half dry brush, half base coat. It's not really anything too tricky. And you'll notice when I touch the edges of the rock, I'm getting some of that color up there, and that's purposeful. And that's why I wanted to get a little of that red, that white and gray up on the side, so I can create some tonal variation for free when I get up on the side. So there we go. Put our red on there. Doesn't look that much different on camera. This is going to be a fun thing to shoot, by the way, I'm realizing now, because reds really don't come out well on camera, but that's okay. So be it. All right. Yeah, like the red to yellow transition on camera basically doesn't work. So that should be fun. I'm going to paint all this, and at the end, you're going to not know what the heck I'm doing, but I'm going to give it a shot. At least you'll see the technique, regardless if you can't see the effect. You'll have to believe me that in real life, it looks a lot better. So now we're going to take some flat red. So this is 957 flat red model color. I love this color. It's a great bright red. It's like a Ferrari red type of color. So yeah, very fun. So we're going to take this. Guess what we're going to do? We're going to get a little on here. We're going to wipe it mostly off. And then we're just going to, yes, I haven't really let that dry. I don't care. That's fine. At this point, we can afford to be a little messy because we want the colors to mix up and be intermingled. And this is a free way of doing that. So now I'm just going to go ahead and dry brush that over here. I'm still, each stage of this, I get just a little lighter with my dry brush. Okay? But I never have to worry too much. If you press a little too hard, it's fine. You've still got your other reds on there. Just throw another layer of the old one back on. Mix them in. Again, what's beautiful about making lava bases, you don't need to be that careful. You can just screw up all over the place and it'll still come out fine. So that's what's great. Okay, so there you go. Nice and quick. Some simple red. And you can see I'm favoring the outer edges with this, right? Each time I'm painting a little less toward the edges. All right. Let's get rid of our flat red here. Guess what time it is? If you guessed orange, you're wrong. Okay? Because now we're going to bring in back our trick from undershading. So we all remember our previous video about undershading, and that's where this is going to come in. I need to jump up some brightness here fairly quickly. And that's why I've got a thin orange, and a thin yellow. So my next step is actually going to be to take this aged white, which is a very nice creamy sort of ivory color, right? And we're going to get a little of that and kind of just spread that around. Now, I'm not going to let the red dry. You could, it doesn't matter. If you don't, also not a problem. The point being, I just need to spread a little of that red around, or this white around. And if it happens to mix with the existing red, that's not a problem. That's okay. That's still going to serve our purposes. Because in mixing, we're going to get some lighter tones. We're actually going to get pinks, which can be scary, because you're like, there, pink does not have a home in lava. If you're saying that to yourself at home, you're correct. There's no pink lava. So here we go. So what am I going to do? I'm just going to very lightly drag this along. Right around the edges. Okay, so that's all I did. Hopefully we can see that. There you go. Nice light touch. Just trying to hit these ridges where lava might be boiling up or something like that. You know, creating little hot spots. Maybe I hit it a little more right here because I want that to be particularly hot. And you notice I kind of turned it pink. And that's alright. Don't worry. It's not going to stay pink for long. Alright, so we're going to let that dry there. Okay, so what's our plan from here? Our plan from here is now we're going to let that dry just a little because we do want that to stay, we want this to be mostly dry by the time we attack it. But now we're going to get into the orange and yellow. The key with these oranges and yellows is even if I was to use a thicker orange, like if I got a model color bright orange, okay, it's still a fairly thin color. And what I want here is I want this to be a nice, sharp, bright lava color, right? So hence this quick jump to create this pink. Because by adding this little white in, we created these nice little light raised areas. Okay? And now that I've got that, it's going to be much more ready to take this brighter color, this orange, and really change color. Okay? So, let's get some orange on our brush here. And we're just going to hit that. Same strategy. We're just kind of brushing over the high parts. And we're not aiming to just hit the areas we hit before. I want to put some of this orange both over the white and over the darker red. Because where it hits the darker red, it's going to turn it more sort of a bright red. Where it hits the white, it's going to be pure orange. Again, by covering it over on all those things, we're creating those tonal variations that make it look natural. Okay? So we see some that's hot, some that's a little cooler, and so on and so forth. Okay? So there we go. You can see how pink is gone, replaced by orange, all set. Okay? So now we have our final step. Yellow. Good old yellow. The thinnest color around. Alright, yellow, always a pain to work with, and it's no different here. Especially because we're going over a relatively light color. So, it's going to take probably a couple of stabs at this to get it where we want it, and that's okay. So what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to kind of stab at this. I'm like half dry brushing, half stippling to get that to change color. Okay? So now how we look is like that. You can very clearly see that yellow tone even on there. So now the key is I'm going to let that dry here for a moment. And I'm actually going to put some more yellow on my palette because I want everything to dry. I want my brush to dry out a little because I have to clean it here in the middle. I want the paint to dry out a little because that first yellow that we put out is going to be very, is naturally very liquidy. It mixed with some of the wet paint we had underneath, and that's okay. That's not a problem. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to let that sit there for a second. It's just going to kind of dry out while this model's drying. Okay? And what we're going to do is come back in with that yellow, and we're going to create some very bright tones. Now, Everything I've done so far is still out there on my palette, and I can come back to it. So if I wanted to come in and take a little more of this bright red, okay, and kind of mix that in, just kind of stipple that / dry brush that around, I could do that. And what's going to happen is it's going to react much differently and be very bright where it hits the yellow and be still the same dark color where it hits the darker red. And you can use this to create some subtle tonal variation, again, which is what this is all about, in your lava. You just kind of mix around and create these hot and cool spots that you want to create, okay, by just mixing the paint back and forth. Again, doesn't take a long time. If you've got a couple dry brushes, you don't have to, you could even just have a bunch of them and kind of be doing it back and forth a lot. You're getting the paints all mixed up. That's what you want. You want them to be all intermingled and looking natural, looking like flowing lava. Okay. All right. So let's take a little of that yellow. Let's get that back on our brush here. And we are really going to make some bright spots here. And that's okay. That's what we want. We want them to be very bright. And we're going to really wipe that off so we have it down to just a dry brush. And we're going to work in around the edges. What we do is we're just going to take the edge of where we did that yellow, and we're just going to kind of smooth it out. So you can see how I stippled on 4 bright spots, and then I took the brush with almost no paint on it whatsoever, right? And I pushed it into the still kind of wet other paints. And the point of that being is I was actually sort of wet blending it on the model, right? So now what I've got is this very nice mixture of these yellows and oranges, right? And again, if I wanted to create more variation, I could just go back and forth. If I wanted to darken that down, I can go back to my orange, right? So I could go back to that, and I could take a little bit of the orange and kind of mix it in there, right? So if I wanted to knock a little of the yellow out, I could do that by putting on a little more of the orange. I could kind of run it up along the sides here. Everything is just changing it a little at this point. It's all kind of now just getting it to your tastes, where you want it. How yellow do you want it? How red do you want it? Like on the camera, that looks very yellow. In real life, it isn't quite that yellow. So you just mix to your taste from this point. Okay? So you can keep playing with all those on your palette. If you just lay them out, you just kind of dry brush it back and forth. You've got your ridges. You can work with those. If you want to wait over time, you can even come back in later once everything's completely dry, and you could do like a quick second layer where you just kind of hit the high stuff with like a mid-tone or something, and that would also be fine. The point is that it's easy. Why are these easy? Because honestly, it's very hard to screw up. You just use a color range that looks something like this, okay? Something like a dark red to a yellow. Use your white to make bright hot spots whenever you want to do that, and you're good to go. That's all there is to it. So there you go. Lava bases, not too hard, pretty easy technique. I encourage you to experiment around, play with this, play with an airbrush, see what else you can do out of it. There's lots of fun little tricks with lava bases and airbrushes. You can create little hot streaks. Like if you've got a long running river of lava, you can do nice yellow lines right through your lava and stuff like that. Very easy with an airbrush. So there's lots of fun techniques out there. If you've got your own tricks for doing lava, I'd love to hear them because there really is it's a thing where there's a lot out there, and this is a really fun basing scheme to do. Works great with like your corn and other similar demonic models and things like that. So look forward to seeing your comments. Certainly hope this helped. As always, greatly appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next time.